I'm going to get into a lot of detail in just a couple seconds, but just a very brief, as succinct as possible in answer to the question, what is EyeSpy? It is a computerized vision screening program that can evaluate the entire visual system of a child while they play a 2 to 3 minute video game. And so you'll see that again in just a few minutes, but that's what we're talking about, is just a really simple, from the child's perspective, it's really just a very simple video game, matching video game. The impetus behind the development of EyeSpy was predicated upon the prevalence and severity of vision problems in children. I understand, and I apologize in advance, I may be preaching to the choir, so I won't spend a lot of time on these statistics and what could otherwise be perceived as boring information, but I do want to share with you some information, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that may arise from this. But in general, on the national average, about 1 in 4 children has a vision disorder. So we are talking about something that has a high degree of prevalence. And as you may have already seen, either through your work as educators and administrators and health professionals, or maybe in your own life, it's unquestionable that vision is just critically important to virtually every aspect of a child's life. And the lack of detection when it comes to vision disorders is actually what poses the most significant risk from an educational perspective, in my opinion. To add insult to injury, children that are already experiencing problems academically or socioeconomically are disproportionately affected by vision problems. So this is why our organization is so passionate about what we do. And like I said, really serves as the impetus behind the development of EyeSpy. So there's a couple of pieces of information I'll share with you. Again, don't want to dig into too much and spend too much time on this, but 20% of American children have uncorrected vision issues. And there are studies that suggest, some studies are in the 70% range and some studies are in the high 80s. But at the end of the day, most people can understand, despite the exact percentage, it is very clear that a lot of what children learn early on in their life comes through the processing of visual information, right? So it's the adage that if a child can't see the blackboard or the whiteboard, you know, how do we expect them to learn? What I will say is this: obviously, a visually disabled child, if we are aware that a child is blind or has a visual deficit, we can certainly make accommodations for that, and those children can be taught. That makes total sense. The issue is that if we don't know that a child has a vision problem, their performance academically and otherwise can be misinterpreted and very often confused for learning disabilities. So there are a litany of visual deficits that can afflict a child. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but what I will say is this, is that certain visual disorders can either exasperate or be, again, misdiagnosed for ADD or ADHD. And that is a topic to which I could speak for hours. I wouldn't dare do that to either one of you. But what I will say is this, is that this has been medically and scientifically proven time and time again. And if there were no other reason to vision screen children accurately and reliably, this would be it. Because you certainly don't want to administer psychotropic medication to a child whose brain does not require that medication. And so when we talk about general health, there's lots of studies out there that show that general health is even impacted by poor vision, and there's an increase of about 50% in the prevalence of obesity in children that have a chronic vision or hearing condition. So that's certainly incentive as well. When we talk about, again, a specific vision condition called amblyopia, commonly referred to as lazy eye, children that are amblyopic actually read slower. And I don't have to tell either one of you just how incredibly impactful that is, especially when reading is so integral to academic performance. That's why so many states have third grade reading assessments. I don't know that every state does. I would assume so, but you know what happens when I make assumptions, so I won't do that. But there's no question that reading is critically important to learning and the educational process overall. And yet here's a visual condition that is can be very challenging to detect, and yet it has a significant impact on this critical skill. I won't spend too much time on this except to say that every 5 years or so, the state of Michigan goes out and they study all of their publicly funded preventative health programs, and they try to ascertain what is the return on those public dollars that have been invested in these programs. And time again, they come back with a significant value associated with vision screening children for vision problems. In their particular study, they find that the rate of return is about 162 to 1. Whether or not, that's the exact number, it does show significant benefit, not just to a child's academic performance, but there's all other aspects of the child's life that are positively impacted when we identify them as having a vision problem. Everything from lifelong economic earning, even linkages to criminality. So it's not so far-fetched, but I don't have their internal analysis to share with you. But that is what they published. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This has to do with the ROI for your particular district. So there's a calculator, but I'm not a fan of going through any of that. So I'm going to take a quick moment, see if there's any questions. Hopefully neither one of you have fallen asleep yet. I could do that to you, and I apologize in advance if that happens. So even knowing I have slides interjected throughout the presentation, asking if there's any questions, again, I stress to both of you, just interrupt me at any point in time, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. So how has screening been done? And again, maybe preaching to the choir, so my apologies. But in short, the most important thing to note is that there has never been a standardized approach. And that is hugely problematic in and of itself. So a wall chart is not a standardized approach. And the reason for that is because it relies so heavily on individual human interpretation. So even if the three of us went into the same room and received the same training and certification at the exact same time, I guarantee that Danielle and Tom and we are all going to do vision screenings differently. Even if we have the best intentions in the world and receive the exact same training. And quite frankly, the way that I perform a vision screening will vary from day to day to day to day. And that's just the human condition. On top of that, when we use a wall chart, we have to then record the results by hand. And this process of record keeping is extraordinarily laborious. What ends up happening is that vision problems are missed. And the reason why I'm talking specifically using the wall chart, which has been around, it's a very recent advancement. It's been around since 1862. It was first introduced into schools in 1899. So obviously I'm speaking tongue in cheek when I say that it's a brand new technology. It's been around for a long time. But the problem is that you're talking about a static document. So children can easily peek or memorize the wall chart, which they do. Like I had mentioned, it requires extensive training and relies heavily on that human interpretation. And at the end of the day, what we're talking about is it's not just expensive from a time perspective. It's really expensive because at the end of the day, we end up missing children. Now, if you wanted to use a wall chart and do so properly, I hate to say that, but for lack of a better term, there are a set of rules referred to as a protocol that you can employ when using a wall chart. And so that's what these 9 pages summarize. And I don't know if you can appreciate this, but this is an extraordinarily complex, virtually impossible to memorize protocol. But if it were employed perfectly each and every time, it would take probably 10 to 15 minutes to assess a child's visual acuity. But if you did this, you'd get an accurate and reliable result so long as the child did not memorize the wall chart and did not peek. So despite the shortcomings of a wall chart, there is a joint committee that is assembled every 5 years by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And they put together a set of recommendations in the form of a policy statement. The contributing members to this joint committee are not just the AAP, but also the American Academy of Ophthalmology, the American Association for Pediatric Ophthalmology and Strabismus, and the American Association of Certified Orthoptists. So we're talking about pediatric and ophthalmic experts. And what they say is very simple. In children that are not of school age, then we can use an objective screening. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about what I mean by, or what they mean by an objective or instrument-based screening. But they make it very clear that by the time a child is 5 years or older, we should be doing a subjective screening. So objective versus subjective, and let's talk about that. An objective or instrument-based screening is essentially a camera. And they come in different form factors, but at the end of the day, what they do is they shine light in the child's eyes, they measure the light coming out, and they use these measurements to evaluate for risk factors. Now, these are incredibly easy to use. They're also expensive, but they're great devices. They're very fast. You don't have to be certified. And it will give you an idea as to the shape of the child's eyes. However, if you notice when you go to your optometrist or ophthalmologist, they don't use these devices. What they do is they use a phoropter and they have you identify letters or numbers on a wall chart. Okay? This is a subjective technique. And the reason why it's referred to as subjective is because what you're doing is you're dynamically interacting, in this case with a child. You're engaging them in order to evaluate their entire visual system, which is comprised of not just their eyes, which this type of instrument looks at, but you're evaluating the optic nerve, the vision center of the brain, and even the cognitive function of the vision center of the brain. And so what you're doing is you're answering the question, can the child see? Okay. Now, in order to do this, like I had already mentioned, a lot of training, a lot of interpretation, and it takes time. This does not answer whether or not the child can see. This answers the question, what is the shape of the child's eyes? This process is trying to answer the question, can the child see? So diagrammatically, this is the difference. An objective screening looks at the child's eyeballs, right? But a subjective screening is looking holistically at the entire visual system. And that is critically important. And that is exactly why the AAP Joint Committee says this is what we need to be doing for school-age children. So this is what EyeSpy looks like when it's in use. But this is just one example. But you can see these kids are sitting down at a table. Some of them are waiting for the proctor to assist them in the, screening process, because it will pause, as you will see in a few moments, and instruct the proctor what to do. But in general, it's a self-administering vision screening. And during that process, it assesses the child's visual acuity and their depth perception, and optionally their color vision. And it, in addition to automating the vision screening process, it also automates the collection and the reporting of the screening results. So hugely advantageous to schools, because at the end of the day, this was designed by schools for schools. So many, many, many moons ago, and many years ago, we assembled a very large consortium of focus group participants from all aspects of education. So administrators, educators, and health professionals. And they, through their expertise, helped us design EyeSpy. From a medical perspective, we also assembled a very large medical advisory board for the same reason. So we wanted to make sure that the product, I hate to call it a product, but the system worked on two fronts. It had to work within the framework of a school, and it also had to be medically accurate. So those were our two primal criteria, or at least top of the list. So with EyeSpy 2020, what you end up with is a system that is randomized. The reason why that's so important is because it makes it impossible for the child to cheat or memorize the system. We also computerized the protocol so that there was no certification necessary in order to administer the test and receive accurate results. And at the end of the day, like I'd already mentioned, really wanted to lift the task of not just recording the data, but also storing and reporting the data, take that off of the school's back where we could. So I'm not going to go through all of this. This is just a summation of what I was just blabbering about. What I will point out is that with your licenses, you can install EyeSpy on as many computers as you want. And that's hugely beneficial because, as you could see in many of the photographs, there are multiple children being screened simultaneously, which is also advantageous because, it allows you to screen more children more quickly. So when we talk about medical validation, it's important to note that what we did was we sent EyeSpy off to the Medical University of South Carolina for purposes of having an independent group of experts, scientists, research scientists, doctors, evaluate the program. And I won't go through all the detail. This is available on the VisionQuest website. I can email it to you guys if you want to read the study. But what I will say is this, is that what they said, what they found was that, and I'm reading directly from the results section. It says EyeSpy screening results using a patch were not significantly different than those of a professional examination. Now, let me just stop real quick and just say one thing. EyeSpy is not a replacement for a full eye exam. It's critically important to understand that if every child could get a full eye exam each and every year, that is the gold standard. The job of EyeSpy is not to diagnose, nor is it a therapeutic device. The job of EyeSpy is simply to quickly, accurately, and reliably identify those children that need to be seen by the eye doctor. That's it. So I'm going to talk about data real quick, because what we're going to do in just a couple seconds is actually look at EyeSpy in real life. But I just wanted to share with you this diagram because it's important to talk about the data. Just, again, very briefly, we store all of your data in a HIPAA, FERPA compliant centralized data system. And so you don't have to worry about protecting your data. We do this. And by the way, we do this globally. So we have programs in Africa, India, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, South America, Canada, and of course throughout the United States. And there's probably some that I'm missing, so I apologize for that oversight. But the point is, of course, we do work in Mexico as well. So my point is that we take, as much as I would like to say we're a vision screening company, we're really a data company. Cloudscaper develops secure data systems for a variety of clients, and we employ that same aggressive protection to all of our data systems, including the data that is collected by the EyeSpy system. So no one, Tom, no one sees your data other than you, and Danielle, no one sees your data other than you, of course, and your authorized users. But there's no sharing of data. Just like if all three of us bank at Chase Bank, I can access my puny bank account, but I can't see anybody else's, which is probably good because it would just depress me. So that data is available to you 24/7, from which you can derive summary reports, individual screening reports. You can dump your data into Microsoft Excel. And of course, you can export your data into other secure databases. However, most other databases like ours don't have open access to their databases for very good reasons, just like we don't provide access to our database. So what happens, what you'll find in real life, is that most of the time you export your data into Excel and then you import it into your other data system, whether it's Synergy or HealthMaster or any of the other systems that are out there. So with that, what I want to do is, and again, I want you guys to chime in at any point, but I want to show you EyeSpy in real life, because this is where the rubber hits the road. Now, this won't take long, but it's from my perspective, I really want you to see this, because all that other information only sets a backdrop. It's really only intended to set a backdrop to what the child experiences. So as a proctor, I'm going to conduct a vision screening. And so the first thing that I do when I log into EyeSpy is I type in, if this is the computer for which I'm responsible, I'm going to type in my name and the proctor name. Now, there are two ways by which I can vision screen a student. The first thing that I can do is I can just type in the child's name, just like this. And I can put in their birth date. And I happen to know that Tom is a very fine young man. So, he's young, despite his deep voice, if you hear him chime in at all. But don't let that fool you. He's 6 years old. So, and I can put this information in. You can see I'm just going in and inputting his information in manually. Now, that's fine, and there are certainly many, many schools that choose to type in each child's information at the time of vision screening. So certainly your prerogative, and there's no harm in doing that. However, if you want to ensure the accuracy and save time of the student's information, if you'll notice, I've highlighted the button that says Select Student from List. I'm going to click that button. And what I'm going to show you, and this is not real data, so don't worry, there's no violation. This is all fake data. But I want to show you that I've got 866 students preloaded into my system. So what I can do is I can export my roster with the help of my IT department or qualified staff to grab my roster, put it into Excel, bring it into EyeSpy, and if I import it on one machine, then it instantly becomes available across all the devices that have EyeSpy installed. So I want to vision screen a child. So a child walks in, and the first thing that I'm going to point out is that this child happens to be in third grade. So I put in 3, or if I happen to know that they were in Clark's class, then I could put in further search criteria. Now, instead of having 1,900 students, I've got 30 students. Or I could just say, well, I happen to know that this student's name is London. So even if I didn't put in these other search criteria, if I just start to put in the first few initials of their name, so let's just say I'm looking for R.I., there we go. So now I know that I was looking for Richard No, or Richard Bates. Okay, so the reason why I'm taking the time, if you will, to show you this is because this is a powerful way to save time, and the way by which we are searching for information is the exact same way that you would identify a child that's already been vision screened and is in your database. And I'm going to show that to you in just a second. So this young lady, her name is Reese, and I am going to now select her by double clicking. And what you'll notice is that all of Reese's information was entered for me automatically. So now the only thing that I have to do is determine the status of her glasses. Now, let me just say this. There's obviously none and wearing her glasses. Those are obvious. What may not be obvious is why we discern between these two things. And that is because when it comes to rescreening a child, depending on what protocol you have in your school, you may say, any children that fail the vision screening, we want to rescreen in 2 weeks. I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm saying that that's reality, that there are some schools that say we're not going to refer immediately. We are going to retest that child and make sure that they actually they weren't having a bad day, so to speak. However, there's a significant difference between I forgot my glasses at home, because from a reporting standpoint, you might want to run a report and just, on the children that had forgotten their glasses, versus a child that says to you, no, I no longer have my glasses because they're lost or broken. See, these two are very different than none. None indicates that the child has not been prescribed glasses. Wearing means that Reese has her glasses and she's wearing them. And forgot, lost, or broken, those are significant differences. I forgot them at home, or excuse me, in the classroom, versus they got broken. So I'm going to say that Reese has her glasses. One other thing I want to point out is when I'm asking Reese about her glasses, I want to make sure that they're not the glasses that she wears when she's reading a book or when she's using her iPad. I want to make sure that these are the glasses that she wears when she's watching TV or in class, seeing the teacher in the front of the classroom or outside playing. The reason for this is because, as you'll see in just a couple minutes, EyeSpy 2020 is played, I'll use that term loosely, but it's played at a distance of 10 feet. So reading glasses will blur her vision in such a way that it's not an accurate test. So when I'm talking to Reese, just want to make sure she's wearing her outside glasses, so to speak. Okay, so all I have to do at this point now is hit begin screening, and it is pretty much that straightforward. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit begin screening. Even if I've never conducted a vision screening before, what you'll see is the good news is it tells me exactly what I have to do. So this is my very first screening. So it says, well, attention proctor, that's me. Make sure the student is wearing her clean corrective lenses with no eye patch or colored glasses at this time. Press enter when ready. So I make sure she's got her glasses on, they're not dirty, and virtually every child immediately grabs the mouse and knows what to do at this point. Now, I'm not saying that you won't have to encourage some children. What I would say to Reese is if she looks like she's reticent to actually start to do anything, I might say to Reese, do you see those characters on the screen? Go ahead and move your mouse and pick who you want to be. So she immediately starts to get familiar with moving the mouse left to right. And then when she's ready, she can just click the button. And that's pretty much the beginning of the test. So she can just select who she wants to be. There's no right or wrong answer. And the very first thing that it's going to do is EyeSpy is going to automatically select which optotypes, letters, shapes, numbers, are to be displayed based on the individual age of the child. So those optotypes are selected on your behalf automatically. And if she's not sure what to do, you can just ask her, do you see the letter at the bottom of the screen? And do you see the letters at the top? Line them up when they match. Or line them up, and when they match, go ahead and click the button. Now again, I can tell you it's rare that you have to instruct a child what to do. Certainly once you've been using EyeSpy in your school for some time, you'll find that the kids all know what to do. But if you notice, the optotype at the bottom of the screen is getting smaller automatically. So it's taking them down the chart automatically on your behalf. The optotypes at the top of the screen are randomized as well, so there's no opportunity for memorization. If they get an answer wrong, so let's just say that they clicked too soon, you don't have to worry about that because the screening and the algorithms accommodate for that. So there's no negative reinforcement. The only thing that happens is that there's no animation displayed. So they get the positive reinforcement. If they get the answer right, they're rewarded in quotation marks with some cartoon animation. If they get the answer wrong, there's no computer animation, but there's no negative reinforcement. So the first thing that the test did was it assessed her binocular vision with both eyes open and made sure that she could see at minimum required threshold. And now it's asking me to occlude her left eye underneath her corrective lenses. So we provide you a patch, and you put this patch underneath her glasses to cover her left eye. So now we're going to test the right eye. So now I'm going to stop talking so much, and I'll get us through this because I think you have an idea of what's going on. And by the way, you can also turn off the animation. So if you decided you wanted the test to be expedited, you could do that by just clicking the box that says no animation. So I've now evaluated her right eye. So now I want to evaluate her left eye. And in order to do that, I have to move the patch from her left eye to her right eye. So that's what I do. Then I press enter and the test continues. And if you notice, I've already started at critical line. In other words, the optotype at the bottom of the screen is right where she needed to be based on her binocular vision. So the test can actually proceed very quickly. I will say it's a little bit ironic, but if a child has good vision, the test takes a little bit longer than if a child does not have good vision. Because EyeSpy is designed to stop the test as soon as we know that this child should be seen by an eye care professional. It does not protract the screening process duration because it's not a diagnostic tool. We're simply trying to identify those children that need to be seen by an eye care professional. So the average test time is about 2.5 minutes long. But I digress, my apologies. So now it's saying, please remove the patch, and well, I added in please, didn't I? I should put that in there probably. Remove the patch and place colored glasses over the student's corrective lenses. So we provide you red-blue glasses. You put those glasses over the child. And now what happens is they are presented with random dot stereograms that you can only see if you're wearing those glasses. Now, I will say this: it does. It's not as impactful for you because you didn't have your red blue glasses on, so you couldn't see those shapes popping out of the screen. So my apologies for you not being able to enjoy that fun portion of the test, but I can tell you that the kids really like it. If they're not able to see the random dot stereogram at 10 feet, we also provide you a printed stereo card that you then, and by the way, the instructions would pop up on the screen and you would engage the child at about 18 inches, have them identify some of the shapes and input the results into the computer through a single key press. And all of that is, again, prompted automatically. The report is immediately available on the screen. There's no indication, again, the child is sitting 10 feet away. So whether they pass the vision screening or fail the vision screening, they don't know. They're all provided the visual reward of, discovering a dinosaur or a pony or whatever the case may be. And this report is presented. And if you want this report in Spanish, you press the S key. And if you want it in English, you press the E key. And this report is now retained in your data system forever. So we're going to go back and now we're going to pull this report up because the second part of the system that I want to show you, and by the way, you notice that Reese is no longer on the student selection list. That's because we just screened her. So students are removed from this list in real time, which makes the list easier to manage. But now I want to show you the second portion of this. By the way, if you for some reason wanted to vision screen Reese, you could hit immediate rescreen. Her information is populated again. Still wearing her glasses. Now I begin rescreening. If you go into reports, let's look up Reese's information. So I selected the month of August. You could type in any date range you wanted. So if you wanted to look at all your screenings from the beginning of the year, you could do that just as easily. But sometimes I get lazy and just want to hit the radio buttons instead. But Reese is right here. So I can retrieve her vision screening at any point in time by simply clicking on the report. And there's the report that we just performed, by the way. You know that we performed it because that's today, and we performed it at 12:41 just a few minutes ago. Here are all the other screenings. So if I wanted to look at all the children that did not pass the vision screening since January, I could uncheck the pass box, and now those are all the kids that had failed the vision screening. If I only wanted to look at first grade failures, I could put a 1 in there. I'm going to pull up Damien's report just to show you how the report looks slightly different when a child is referred. You'll notice this section called iProfessional Use Only, okay, now appears on the report. And that's because this particular child failed stereo. So the vision screening, the report itself basically says this vision screen suggests your child may have a vision problem. And it's very specific. If your child is not currently under care, a professional eye exam is recommended. Obviously, if the child is already under the care of an eye doctor, well, then that's the parent's prerogative, so to speak, to decide. But we certainly have written this very carefully with a lot of attorneys involved, unfortunately, but that's the nature of the beast, so to speak. But that disclaimer is pretty important because we don't want parents to overreact. Oh, my kid was just at the eye doctor. Why do I have to go back? If you compare that to a pass, what we say is your child's screening was normal. Health screenings are important, but do not replace professional evaluations. And again, with any of the reports, whether it's a pass or a fail, just press the S key and that report can be printed in Spanish. So you have the same filter search ability here, that you do with the preloaded student list. But that is the power. All of this data is stored in the centralized data repository for you. You can print summary reports, and I'm more than happy to show that to you if you guys indicate that you're interested in me taking the time to do that. But there are summary reports that are available. You can dump the data into Excel by saying export. And you know what? There's one more thing I'm going to show you real quick, and then I promise I'm going to move on. Let me just show you something real quick. If I want a report to go home to the parent that does not include this level of detail, okay, I can go back here and I can say, rather than show all the detail, just show pass fail. And now when I pull up that report, it doesn't give all the specifics. It just basically says pass or fail. One last thing I'll show you, if I'm still getting too many phone calls from my parents and I just want to give them the overall result, then I can say overall only. And now there's no information. It just says there may be a vision problem. So to your prerogative, I would say 95% of schools send home a detailed report, but that's entirely up to you. So with that, and again, you guys are welcome to interrupt me. I know it might be a drink out of a fire hose. My apologies for that, but I'm more than willing to answer any questions. One thing I want to share with you also is this feedback button. I just want to point out that one of the things that you can do is, because this is truly anonymous, so I don't like Rich very much. Obviously we want positive feedback, but we also want any feedback, and therefore this is truly anonymous. We do not want you to feel quote unquote guilty or have any trepidation in providing us feedback. So when you type comments into this, we have absolutely no idea where it came from. So what you have to do is you have to, if you want us to contact you, you have to be willing or not willing. I mean, we just don't know where it's coming from. So you got to put in your email address or your cell phone number or your fax number, whatever it is, please call me. If you want us to respond to you, then you've got to give us your information, because if you don't, we have no idea where these submissions come from, if that makes any sense at all. So with that, I am going to go back to the presentation just to keep us on schedule and give us more time for Q&A. There's some stuff I want to share with you, but it's not this. We're receiving EyeSpy. We're already underway with regards to that, so I don't want to spend time talking about that. If you go to EyeSpy2020.com or VisionQuest2020.org, either one, there's a planning tool available. Again, I have trepidation spending too much time on this, but if you want to talk about this at some point, I'm more than happy. It's an estimator. If you put the information in about how many children you intend to screen, it'll help you determine how much time is available. This is really what is the important part, if you will. I want to point some stuff out, because this to me is of huge benefit to see without me sitting in front of you. So the distance from the child's eye to the screen is 10 feet. And one of the questions we get most often is, how do I know 10 feet? Do I need a tape measure? Well, fortunately you don't, because if you can see that mouse cable that's draped on the floor, let me highlight it in a different color. Forgive me, I'm not very fast, but this white cable that you see that's draped on the floor, we provide you that extension cable. And it just so happens that that extension cable is 10 feet long. So when you're setting up the computers for vision screening, what you do is you take that mouse cable, see that mouse cable that's plugged into the computer? You use that mouse cable to set up the distance. And then when you're all done setting up the distance, you plug that mouse cable into the computer like they have right there. That's the black cable that's actually plugged in. And then it drapes down. It's hard to see here, but anyway, especially because I'm covering it up with all the same colors. But anyway, that gives you the slack in the mouse cable, because you take the child's, the tabletop mouse, and you plug that in to the cable down here, and that way you're not tripping over cables when you're walking in between students to proctor the vision screenings. The distance between the students here should at least be 2 feet. But anyway, you'll find that in practice. You want to have room between the computers, between the children, so that, as you can see, this proctor she will stand in between the students, and she obviously does not want to obscure their field of view on their respective machines. There's one other thing I want to point out with your indulgence, and I will say this. These children, I love to start with the oldest group of children. And the reason why is because they just, they're familiar with video games. They understand matching. They just get it. So what happens is if let's say I'm screening first through third, just as an example. What I do is I take my kids, my third graders, and I pull them down first, and they let them play the game. And the third graders that are waiting to play the game, they sit back here and they watch these students, my first batch of students. I may have to explain to one of them how to play the game. And then what happens is when these kids come to sit into the chair, you don't have to say anything. They are rip-roaring, ready to go, because they've already observed. Well, then what happens is as I start to run out of third graders, and now I'm calling in my second graders, guess what I do? I make sure that there's third graders that are playing the game. By the way, thank you for the kind words, Tom, in the chat box. And I bring in my second graders, and guess what? They just get to watch the third graders play. Second graders are now I'm done with my third graders. Second graders come in, they know exactly what to do. Because believe me, it works every single time. And then sure enough, second graders are sitting there. I'm starting to run out. I bring in my first graders. They sit there. They know exactly what to do when I move them into the chair. So and by the way, you'll come up with your own logistics flow on what works best for your particular situation. And I would love, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, anything that you want to share with us that will make us better stewards of the information, and how to improve our training, our written materials, whatever. We would love your feedback. So I can tell you there are certain schools that have the student ID and the child's name written on a sticker and placed on their shirt, so that when the proctor, when the student sits down, the proctor doesn't even have to ask the student their name. They already know they're screening, Johnny's class, or, Miss Apple's class or Mr. Apple's class. So they filtered the preloaded list, and now they know that this child sat down, maybe their name and birth date's on the list. It depends. Different schools handle it differently, but regardless, those various options, whatever you find works for you, we would love to know. I'm going to continue on with the understanding that you guys are invited to interrupt me and tell me to be quiet at any point in time. That's the 10-foot mouse extension cable that I talked about. So remember, one side is going to go into the laptop, and then you're going to take your mouse, and it's a wired mouse. And there's reasons why we require wired mouses. And it's not just for the use of this cable. We monitor the child's responses 1,000 times a second. Now, without getting too technical, because remember, I warned you guys, I'm really a geek. Bluetooth, I can't look at the responses fast enough with Bluetooth. In addition, if I've got 4, 5, 6 students lined up in a row, the interference from the Bluetooth from one design, one setup, one vision screening lane to the next, introduces variability that is not favorable. So anyway, wired mouse that you provide along with the laptops, and then you use this cable to connect them. The red-blue glasses, these are not just normal red-blue glasses. These are specially designed just for EyeSpy. We provide reversible occluders. If you notice, the frame, unlike normal glasses that have an ear piece, these are flat. And so what it allows you to do is simply flip them over, when you're trying to screen, like if I put those on the kid right now, I'm going to be covering his left eye. That's a nose and his mouth. You can see I'm a very good artist. So I'm covering his or her left eye. As soon as I flip them over, now the black part ends up here and the clear, so I change the eye that I occlude. If they're wearing glasses, then you use the cloth patch. This is the near stereo card that I referred to earlier. The layer response panel is no longer a layer response panel. We found to have better results with regards to special needs with the HOTV symbols. So the panel won't look like this. It's going to have the HOTV, and my apologies for not updating the presentation. But you're going to have HOTV on the panel. And there's a whole section in the user manual about how to vision screen children with special needs. And I think you'll find that EyeSpy does a really good job of that. There's also a quick start guide. Now, the quick start guide, has only 4 pages, so it's not a tough read. You can also download it from the internet, from our website. But I'll just share with you the first page, which is the setup page. That's really what I wanted to talk about. Well, the first page is actually how to download and install it. I don't want to talk about that right now. But I'm more than happy to work with your individual schools and districts to make that happen, work with your IT department if that's applicable. But, this is a piece of literature that I would print out and leave, at the vision screening station for those volunteers and proctors that are conducting the vision screenings, should you find that advantageous. I think it is. Because it reminds you to do certain things like, hey, make sure there's no glare on the screen, make sure that you're using a testing distance of 10 feet, make sure that the mouse is connected, stuff that might be obvious to someone that does this every day, but not necessarily obvious if this is your first time doing a vision screening. So that's why I say we need about 2 feet between the kids so that the proctor can stand there if, in this case, you're operating 2 vision screening lanes at the same time, which you can do. You just need to be able to make sure you can use that egress. Equipping the stations with, the appropriate materials, turning on the computers. Don't worry if you don't have a connection to the internet. That's not required while you're doing the vision screening. So again, drink out of a fire hose. My sincere apologies, but I'm going to keep moving on because let me turn on, I want to share with you, hold on, my screen will come back. Okay, let me get out of this for just a second. My apologies. I think I'm sophisticated, but the truth of the matter is I'm not. So let me see if this works. There we go. Okay. We should be good now. Hopefully you guys can see my screen, the web browser. So visionquest2020.org. I had mentioned EyeSpy2020.com. You can certainly go there. I happen to like the VisionQuest website a little bit more for the following reasons. First and foremost, if you go to resources and you go down to materials, oh, by the way, that's the planning tool I had talked about earlier. If you go to materials, the reason why I like it is because, and I know, Tom, you've probably already done this, and Danielle, you may have done this as well, but there's a complete user's guide that you can download and print. You can produce your own quick start guides. There's an informational brochure that's entirely your prerogative as to whether or not you want to use that. There's a parent information handout that some schools find to be of value in conjunction with providing parents the vision screening report. Some schools say, hey, we want to provide them some additional information. So entirely your prerogative. If you need a new stereo, near stereo test card, you can print that out as well in the response panel. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Now, there is also a little section here called installation. And I'll just cover that real quickly, because for those of you that have an IT department, or you're, you play multiple roles, and the question is, well, what is required to actually do the installation? Go ahead, go to resources, go to installation, download this document, and then this is where you download the software. So you read the instructions and then click this box and start the installation process. And by the way, I'd be honored to help any of you with the installation process if that's something that you'd like. The last thing that I'm going to show you before I talk about technical support, and I promise, guys, I'm going to wrap up, so my apologies, but I just want to show you the library. Library is for schools and parents with regards to finding doctors, receiving assistance, discussions around health coverage, and other resources and support. So there's a lot here. If you want to read that validation study, remember I talked about that validation study where they said EyeSpy was really, really good. Go ahead and read that. If you want more about the policy statement that I referred to, like, hey, you should do subjective vision screening on school-age children, you could read that. This is your resource. So go ahead and go to the library. Boy, I like saying that. That's interesting. It's been a long time since I ever talked about that. But anyway, you're more than welcome to refer, not just for your own purposes, but refer anyone you wish to this resource. One other thing I'll point out, the testimonial forms. Listen, if you've got success stories around the use of EyeSpy, don't be shy. This is extraordinarily beneficial for us to know about, and it keeps us and the entire staff. And believe me, we got a lot of people involved in these things. They touch our heart much more than you know. So if someone's got something to say, this testimonial form is, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be positive, but we want to know how we're impacting children. Also, if you're trying to notify parents of the upcoming screening, there are some templates that you can use. So anyway, there's a ton of information here, and wasn't my intent to proselytize the benefits of the website, but I want to know that it's there for you. So I'm going to jump back to this very quickly, only because, let me go back here. Wrong mode. I want to talk about support. And, we are committed to serving you, serving your children. and the students for which you're responsible. And I can't imagine and I say that this is not patronizing. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Would anyone involved in the education of our youth is doing the single most important work from my humble perspective, other than parenting itself. And so we really are committed to your efforts, despite my weird sense of humor. But I will tell you, you and your colleagues have unlimited access to the web-based training, the materials, the videos. You can attend or have others attend as many training sessions. You can email me, which I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. And obviously pick up the phone. We find that speaking on the phone is often not required, but we're certainly able to do that as well. And we also have the ability to remote into your computer with your permission and your supervision if there was a technical issue that required us to do that. So that's my email address, my personal, that's direct to me. Staff does not receive those. So I want you to have direct access to me. You can also go onto the website, and on the website, by the way, you can also submit requests to be contacted through either website. So you can contact us through either one of those websites as well as the email. And with that, we're technically done.